joining us today. This is Rebecca Harrington speaking at this point. I'm the health educator at SUNY Oneonta. That's my official station. And I'm the lead developer of the SUNY SPARC and TRAC programs. We started out launching SPARC a couple of years ago. We released TRAC the year after to be a companion alcohol course. Last year, we put together an implementation manual for folks who wanted to put those together. And then this year, what we're doing this summer is offering a once-a-week class that matches the chapters in the technical document. You can follow along, and really a lot of it is project management. So we're going to talk each week through kind of a chunk of the development and the customization process. And starting this week, we'll start to build in some of the articulate storyline skills. So I also want to say that my counterpart here is Lisa Campo. Lisa, do you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Sure, as soon as I can click the unmute button. My name is Lisa Campo. I'm a paralegal in the Office of General Counsel at SUNY System Administration. And I have just been trying to facilitate the SPARC and the SAVER programs and help Rebecca get these informational webinars set up and running. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have, or feel free to reach out to me if you're trying to contact someone. I will give you my email address. It's lisa.campo, C-A-M-P-O, @suny.edu. And I've also already put a couple notes in the chat box. One is a link that you can click on. It'll bring you to a very short Google form. If you fill that out, it will then, you'll get an email with password for a password protected site, where copies of this recording and many other trainings in the manual and a lot of the things that Rebecca will reference are housed on that password protected site. So you'll need that to access it. Also, just a quick note, as Rebecca mentioned, we're going to be doing these trainings on Tuesdays for the next several weeks. Starting next week, though, we have a different link, and I've put that over in the chat area as well. And that will just require you to register, but only because then we can send an email reminder and things like that. So on that note, I'll send it back to you, Rebecca.
Awesome. So Lisa is your go-to person for accessing content along the way, and she holds down the fort. And so let's see here. I dislike how PowerPoint works and screen share, so we're just going to go right from the good old back end of the program. So the goals for this week is, actually, this doesn't look like it got updated when I saved, so that's a problem. So we're going to talk this week about customizing scripts and text, and that's where we're going to go. This is the front cover of the document I'm referencing and working off of. So here again is the link that Lisa put in the chat. Once you go through, there's a couple of pages tabbed, and the implementation guide is right there. It is pretty hefty. It's over 100 pages. So if you are working from home on a printer, you might not want to just go ahead and push print. But the thought is, when I built this, was thinking about if you started on August 1st and you spent 1 month on each chapter, you would be ready to launch by the next August. I wrote it with 11 chapters as opposed to 12 because my experience in higher education is at least 1 month a year gets away from you. So we did it in 11 months of getting up and running. So last week we talked about who are the people that you want on your team, who are the other campus experts that you're going to want by your side through various parts of the program development. And we talked about you're going to need your learning management system folks, you're going to need your graphic design folks, you're going to need your video folks, and then the folks that are also part of the continuum of care on your campus. So not knowing, if you're Title IX, how are you going to get your prevention folks in? So it really is space for you to invite all of the people that have a part in sexual violence prevention on campus, from prevention to response, to be a part of it. And so that's what we're going to start to talk about now, is how do you engage those folks, and starting to think about the custom parts. So there's, in my mind, a couple of different types of edits that you're going to want to do. There's the specific information that's location and office hours. And And I think for me, when I was going through this, those were some of the last things I thought to put in because like they were just so easy, but in that kind of chaos of getting ready to launch, it just felt like extra tasks to do. So in thinking this through from like if I was going to start over again and leave myself advice, which is what I'm providing back out to you, is start with those things. Like those are really great ways to get involved with learning the software program. And so I'll show you how to do those kinds of edits today. I think campus references is another thing that makes really good sense. There's several scenarios that we use in SPARC. So what are first names that are going to resonate on your campus? I occasionally will go into things in Google search like top 10 names, like let's see, this is 2020, so the students coming would in theory have been born in 2002. So knowing what the top, baby names in 2002 or the early 2000s might give you some ideas about how to find things that will land properly. But there's also opportunities to make references to locations. What are the campus lingo that make the scenarios more realistic for your students? There's the policy and response related content. And so SPARC was created within New York State. So a lot of the policy stuff there, if you're a New York State school, you're not going to have to adjust it much, but you might have some local specific college stuff and that you're going to need your policy experts on board with. I feel really lucky that I have great working relationships with so many folks across campus, and my community standards director and I get along really well, and we spend a lot of time together. And these are those great opportunities to be like, oh, hey, can you look at, these following 3 slides and make sure that it's consistent with the messaging that you're providing from your office. So, finding places in slides that maybe you're not the lead, but being able to kind of chunk it down and be like, hey, these are the 5 slides. This is what's currently there. Can you help me edit this? I think the prevention related content too, these are to me like the strength of SPARC is the fact that you can keep your content and messaging on point and keep it so that it strengthens what you already do. And I do think that what I love about going to different campuses and interacting with other sexual violence prevention folks is that every campus has like a really unique spin. You have different peer education names, but your prevention programs all have unique content. So gathering all of that together. And if you're not the prevention person, making sure you've got your prevention person going through the slides and identifying spaces where you can continue to make those little, I don't know, in my head, I call them breadcrumb educational moments, that path through to keep everything consistent. Descriptive content, and this is how ideas and concepts are presented. So in the SPARC program, there's slides that define sexual assault, relationship violence, stalking, and harassment. And I did work with college students in the definitions that are presented in the slides that you have access to, and you're certainly welcome to use that. But I think it's important to have students pause there, let my dog bark. Hold on, I'm going to close the door. So making sure all of the language works for the students on your campus. So who are other places and spaces where you might have access to students, and maybe more than just the students that are in your office. I occasionally will have a Greek life intern with me, so that gives me access to a whole nother body of students who are willing to take a look and read through stuff. And then in the final module of SPARC, I do some bystander activation, and I go out to my alumni every year and gather their bystander stories. I like the idea of using alumni stories, and especially for students who are like that year out where you're looking for opportunities to touch base with them. The stories that they can offer are wonderful because again, they're gonna reference your local community and the visualization that comes with it. So when a student is talking about a bystander act that they performed on Main Street in Oneonta, like they can really describe the scene and call that up. And I think that's really important because I think for our freshmen who I think bystander stuff is difficult for them at times because they want to appear the same. They're trying to meet the community norms. And if asking them to stand out is not something that they're always going to be comfortable doing. So at least providing them a visualization of what a bystander story looks like in their town is going to be a huge leap for you. And I think the other benefit with using alumni stories is that there's some anonymity. There's less likelihood that students are going to know who is at the center of the story. So there's a lot there, and there's a lot of slides, and it does take some time to go through. The other thing I want to talk about is casting videos, and certainly, like you'll see in SPARC, that there's some content spaces that are provided. We provide text for the end user to read, and some of them are videos. In TRAC, which is the alcohol companion course, and at SUNY Oneonta, I call that course Party Science. The very first year we offered it on campus, it was very reading heavy because I just didn't have the time to create the videos. And then I went back and took every possible reading thing that I thought could become a video and turned that into a video. And what I found was that when I did follow up with students, when it was all reading, they said there was too much reading. When I shifted it, so much of it to video, they complained that there was too much video. And so I'm trying to figure out what the right balance is. So again, those are spaces where you're going to learn as you go of what should be a video and what should be a script. But aim for getting a handful of videos in there. I don't have a best practice advice at this point on how much, although I think the SPARC balance is pretty good, where there's a video slide and then a reading slide, and the video slides are spread out a little bit more. So think about who you want in your videos, because having folks on camera is a great opportunity to introduce incoming students to the members of your campus who are going to support them. And I think, to me, it's all about reducing barriers. Like, I always think of like behavior changes. We have to get students up over an obstacle, but we can control how high that obstacle is. So we don't want them to have to climb over a 6-foot fence to get to help, but maybe a 6-inch fence. So by letting them see the Title IX officer, a UPD officer, your counseling center director, health center director, all of those folks, it provides an opportunity to have that face-to-face. And I've had some really great opportunities where students are pretty connected with me as they get through those first couple of weeks of campus, because they've been introduced to me visually through both Party Science and the SPARC course, plus they have an in-person orientation session with me. So, and I help with move-in. So I'm somebody who's in front of them quite a bit. And I think that's a big assist. And being the person who talks about sex and alcohol is kind of a sweet spot to be for incoming students. So you just kind of get to leverage that opportunity. Also, your college leadership, there's opportunities for people to just do some of those introduction videos. And so we've had my previous college president did the welcome and closing videos. Our new president hasn't had the opportunity to come into the studio yet to record those. So we've had different leadership folks be a part of the welcome. And I think that's great too, to show that the institutional response is strong and supports the messages. And then it's kind of who else is important to your program. In terms of SPARC, I kept it really connected to the folks who are really connected to supporting the issue, and then also a variety of different students presenting information. But in the alcohol course, I didn't provide any students, but instead provided opportunities to my colleagues across student development to come in and record. And it was a really fabulous opportunity, but it gets more people out there. We have one of our counselors in our EOP program came and participated, and it's been a nice connection for her students because they see her in that space. And so it makes it feel like it really is like this whole campus really cares about this issue and cares about you. And so I do think that's an important opportunity that you can look to do. Not everybody is very excited to go on camera. There are certainly people who will say that they will do it and they will be super nervous. And I've been really lucky with my TV studio folks on campus who are really great at coaching folks through that. So I've also contemplated in the past, and I've never pursued it, but opportunities that I think exist. We also have a theater department on campus, so we discussed about maybe getting student volunteers to do hair and makeup, because that connected with their course learning, and it was a place for people to get we have that special touch up before going on camera. So I think for what I've experienced is once people kind of, if they have that gut pull to participate, like they know it's the right thing to do, they are willing to overcome those anxieties. And then you learn how to coach people through the process. I've learned so many different little skills and tricks as I go along that I've been, like to me, like that's one of the fun parts of this project is how many other little things I've gotten to learn along the way. In terms of I have a little sound box room that I'll knock the dog into, so that's where she is. In terms of the wordsmithing, I usually, once I have a person cast to a video, I send them the script that they'll be doing and invite them to say it out loud a couple times, like just alone by themselves, just to have that feeling of words. And if they feel that they want to offer some suggestions about changing it up that don't change the fidelity of the content, I think that's great. I think in terms of area experts, if you've got your Title IX officer going on camera to discuss Title IX, then they should have a lot of leeway with the scripting, and you might be able to just assign that off and not have to worry about that. You just have to give them a deadline. And then the last one is how often are you going to have to re-record those videos? So in my case, in my alcohol course, my alcohol and other drug counselor just took another job at another campus a few months ago, and I had intended to go back into the studio this spring with somebody else to take on refilming those videos. And now I'm kind of stuck in a lurch and trying to figure out what exactly I want to do to replace that, so that you're going to be in situations where the more people you bring in, the more likely you're going to have to re-record a few videos every so often. And especially with my students, and I think, in the future, what I will probably try to do is go to my student activities folks and ask for recommendations for the students who are emerging as student leaders in their sophomore year, so that I can get a few more years from them. Because again, I was in a space this year where I was intending to get new student videos, and will likely just run the ones I currently have for one more year. I think, a little bit of maintenance, but the first year is the big heavy lift of doing all that. So I'm just gonna pause there for a second and see if anybody wants to either come on the mic and ask a question about some of this process, or if this feels like really overwhelming.
We have an event with together that you're going to.
So if you want to put a question in the chat or raise your hand.
I was going to unmute everybody, but there was too much noise. So
good call.
Yeah, probably the chat would be the best mechanism right now.
Okay, cool. So, I think a lot of this stuff is pretty straightforward, but I think, there's components to customization that I think a lot of times people get really bogged down in learning the software program and thinking about the videos. And we're going to have a whole week that's just devoted to talking ourselves through the videos. But I think these are I think to not overly use the term the low-hanging fruit. I think this is a good way to jump in and start doing stuff. Within the technical manual, there are some grid sheets and an appendix so that you can go through and review stuff. I used to go through and use little post-it flags so that each row had represented a slide, and I could post-it flag I would use green post-it flags for all of the slides that had pretty simple editing, and that would be kind of like a task that I would sit down and work through. There's also a way in Articulate you can export the whole program out to Microsoft Word, and it will eat up your computer space. It's a good thing to do right before you go to lunch or right before you head out for a meeting. But then at the end, you get this really nice Word document that's got a picture of every slide and all the content on the slide. And you can use that to make notes and make yourself a playbook to work through. So that said, we are going to talk about some of the software related things today. So we're going to look, in my head, I think there's two parts to learning Articulate Storyline. if you don't already have Articulate Storyline, is the software that is what allows you to edit content and put it together. So there is an educational price of Articulate Storyline 3 that's $700. They advertise it at $1,400. So the educational price is half off. If you are, there's two actual versions of the product. There's Storyline 3, which is a one-time purchase, and then there's Storyline 360, which is the monthly subscription rate. So that's a choice that you have to make. I think you know how your institution likes to spend money. So in some ways it's cheaper on a month-to-month basis, but buying it once, you know that you've got access for as long as you need to have access. But they also offer a free 30-day trial. So you can go ahead and download it and start learning some of these skills and practicing. And then what happens is that after you send in the money to purchase the software license, they give you a code that you input. So everything on your computer stays the same. It just allows you to work on it for longer than 30 days. So I think it's kind of like I was telling people that was like PowerPoint on speed before, because I think it has there's a lot of stuff that's similar to PowerPoint. So if you're a PowerPoint user, you're going to notice that some of the skills are going to translate really well. But I want to talk about there's like a separate, in my mind, there's navigation skills about how to get from point A to point B within the program. And then there's just the content editing skills. So I'm going to shift over. Let's see, I'm going to turn off that screen share. I'm going to shift over to Articulate Storyline. When you open, I went ahead and opened a program already today, and this is my current version of SPARC, or my academic year 1920 version of SPARC. It takes a while to load because the file, once you start adding videos to files, it gets really long, but as a pretty standard file open, kind of a beginning, as most software programs do. This is something called Story View. Story View is kind of the slide sorter thing that you might have stumbled across in PowerPoint before. So you get to see, it's the bird's eye view. You get to see all of the things. And within Story View, your slides get connected through what's called a scene. So this is a scene here. This is all scene 1. This is scene 2. You can name them. And this little red flag here designates what my first scene is. What's the default opening? And we have slides, and you can see these little arrows that show me what the navigation is. If I click on a slide, I can see which way the navigation goes. Like this one here has a back navigation and a front navigation. So I can see some relational content there. The other thing that I can see when I'm in Story View, when I click on a slide, is this thing over here called the triggers panel. And this stays the same when we go into what we'll call slide view in a moment. But what this allows me to see, a trigger is all of the interactive content that's available on a slide. So if there's a button that allows me to go one place, so you can see that there's a back button on that slide, and it says which slide it goes to when the user clicks the back button. There's a next button, it tells me what slide it jumps to when the user clicks that button. And then we're going to talk about layers in just a second, and so I can see that. I can also see how the slide advances. The user is going to do that, and there's some other chunk in there. There are buttons that will appear automatically. I turn those off because I want to control navigation through, but we're going to save that for another day. So let's just get into, so these are the things that you can see in Story View. Now, if I double click on a slide, and I will sacrifice myself here. So, and I will note here that I don't know who wrote the algorithm for thumbnails for videos, but I think they are designed to find the most awkward part of the video, and that's what becomes your thumbnail. And so here we are in a slide view place, and so I can see all of the other slides that are in this scene, and I can actually navigate to different scenes back through this way. So I always have access. If I want to open up, you can see I have a couple of different slides here, so I can navigate through tabs the way you would in a browser. So sometimes if I have multiple slides that are all pretty similar, like you can see over here in this quick navigation here, I have several slides that are all video slides. They all have similar layouts. If I'm kind of getting into the nitty gritties, I can open all of them up and then I can quickly go back and forth and paste content. When I'm in slide view, I have a timeline. So every item that appears on a slide also has a corresponding line in the timeline. So if I click over here, that's simply rectangle 1. If I click on the next button over here, the next button shows up. And what you can see, I'm going to open that up a tiny bit more, that the next button doesn't show up until the 26 second mark. And so those are some of the things that we can control. And we'll talk about the timeline later, but that's, I think sometimes your brain wants to unlock of like, where does that happen? And that's exactly where that happens. So the timeline controls kind of that third dimension. So the content is there, but when does it appear? A little tidbit that I'll drop here because I can't say this enough. When you're pretty sure you have a slide content that you like, you can come over here and you can rename everything. So I've taken some time. So everything that's a video has a VID at the end. Anything that is text has a TXT. If it's a button, has a BTN at the end, which is my own lingo. But sometimes when you have a lot of different things built on your slide, it's really convenient to be able to find those things very easily with good naming, because you can see like rectangle 1 here, that's a storyline designated name. So if you create a lot of rectangles, you just get rectangle 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if you want to highlight a specific one, the other way to highlight content is just come down here and just click and the corresponding stuff comes up. So that's where we start to differ from PowerPoint in terms of what is navigationally here. Again, here's that triggers panel that we could see in the story view where it's telling us like, here's all like the cool, fun things that this slide can do. And this slide also has something called layers. Now, I had used Adobe Photoshop before using this, and so layers was something I had a little bit of an idea about. And layers, it kind of stacks up on top of things. And as I got going with Articulate, I found that layers are a convenient way to keep content grouped together. So this is a slide that is drilling down what's the difference between confidential versus with privacy. So if you're a New York State college, you know that confidential are the offices that have ensured confidentiality, like our medical staff, counseling staff, any spiritual advisors, if they're recognized to have confidentiality, those are those folks. But privacy for us is our Title IX, our community standards, the people who are going to keep information as confidential as possible, but there might be laws that govern that they have to share some information. So I wanted to keep all of that information together. So there's this initial video of me kind of introducing that. And then what happens is that a slide layer is going to come in right on top of what's there. Now it looks like the text is a little mucky right here, and that's okay. That's what you can see down here is that in my timeline, there's one paragraph that shows up for half of the slide, and then there's another paragraph that shows up for the other half of the slide. So that's how you can kind of do those fly out bullets. But so here I am explaining confidential resources, and then I have my Title IX coordinator, Andrew Stammel, describing privacy resources. So the students are navigating through it. And to them, it looks the same. They're still using next buttons, but I'm using a next button to unlock a slide layer. So these are all the things that you can do. And I like the idea of just starting to introduce people to the language and to think about how things are constructed. So sometimes they are these connected through layers. And you can also, like, once you really start digging deep into Articulate storyline, you can set up situations where, depending on how a student responds to content, maybe they get to see different layers. They could see a correct layer message or an incorrect layer message as they navigate through what's going on. So layers are another way that you can put content and group content. So let's talk about where to find all of these things. So this has, Articulate Storyline has a ribbon, just like a lot of our Microsoft Word programs do. From the home button, we have much more layouty kinds of things, but there's your text kinds of content, some of those very standard things. If I click on my text now, I get some highlight over here, and you'll notice that there's this addition. Once I clicked on text, now I have some formatting tools that will let me control what the line of that box is and what the fill of that box is. So let's come back over here to the Home tab. We can add slides here. Tab order is something that's related to accessibility. We'll talk about that later. Insert, this is where it gets fun, right? You get to add pictures, you get to add shapes, and some of these things are pretty standard things that we're used to dealing with in PowerPoint. But then there's also some of these input things that are what creates that interaction with Articulate Storyline, and we'll talk about those later as well. I think those are like the big ones that I use all the time. I spent almost all my time on the home ribbon, the insert ribbon. Slides, this is what you can talk about adding new slides. So there are, again, some deeper stuff in here. So we're going to save that. This one is a pretty familiar ribbon, I'm sure, to a lot of you. The same with transitions. Animations, again, very, very PowerPoint like. The one thing I would talk about here in View is the Slide Master. And this is, again, another chapter where we're going to really drill down into Slide Master. But Slide Master View lets us look at some templates. So I have a Module 1 template slide, a Module 3 template slide. I have my splash screen. This is what I use for a navigation thing. So the buttons aren't there. And I'm going to just close out master view here. So that would be the only other thing that you maybe want to start thinking about, can you go find that on your own? So when you see this little 3 graphic here, that's actually on the slide background, and that will not show up in the timeline because it's in that template back. So I think those are a lot of the navigation skills. The last thing in the ribbon I want to show you is this publish area. There's a player, a preview, and a publish button. And those ones stay pretty consistent across the ribbon. There's almost always a preview button. And when I'm in preview, what I can do when I click this, I can just look at this slide, I can look at the scene, I can look at this entire project. And that's the quick way to review to see if what you're doing is what you want, especially once you start adding navigation or doing user interaction, you can check that out. But if you're working with students and maybe you're going through stuff together, you can just look at the scene and see, like, is this what it looks like from a user end? I tend to preview everything before I publish it because it's a good way to test to make sure everything works. I have a 10-year-old son at home, and I often put him to work doing the preview because he knows to push the next button. And it's a good kind of like when you need to just walk away and the work needs to get done. It's a little bit of a help there. So you can check those things out from there. So I want to talk a little bit though about adding some of those basic content things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back here to Story View, which is that overarching thing. And from Story View, I can add a new scene. And you'll notice that the default slide that gets added into a scene is this, basically the title slide as you would find in a standard PowerPoint kind of thing. I'm going to right click here. I am a PC user, and I'm going to add a new slide. I can choose from templates, but I can choose from basic layouts, and that gives me access to those slides that I've created before. So I don't have a module of 5 thing, but I'm just going to go ahead and create a couple of slides here. We'll pretend that these have number 5s on them. I'm going to double click this, and now I am ready to roll in adding content to this slide. So to add a text box, I'm back up here in my Insert tab, and I'm clicking my text box tool, and then it's a click and drag. And then once you have that text in there, it's pretty simple to get in there. I'm a Control A for highlight all, which it doesn't seem to want to do because we're on camera. So let's just grab that. We can make it a little bit bigger. We can change the font like we would in any other place. We can change the font color, but also, and I believe this is, I don't know, this is not something I do in PowerPoint as much, but you can change out the box around your text pretty quickly too. We can add outline, shape effects, so you can get really, you can start having some fun with that kind of stuff. So if I wanted to come back to, like, let's see here, like Andrew Stammel, let's say he's now the director of the Title IX office. It's pretty simple to come in here. And start doing those kinds of things. So I think these are a really great place to start doing some edits. But let me come back to my untitled slide here. Other things that we can easily add in here are shapes, and there's a whole menu of different shapes. Again, I think this is pretty much the same that you would find in Photoshop. There are some standard kinds of formatting options here, which offer you a color and a line. Once you start using stuff the same over and over and over again, it'll start to remember what stuff you like to use. So a lot of those, you know, kind of coming back here, like this rectangle back here is a rectangle that we just use over and over and over again. So I really kind of designed one slide and then figured out how to copy and paste it to every other slide. But, you know, simple rectangles. I like to use rectangles with rounded corners. I do things like search like graphic design trends 2020 just to get some ideas. You know, it is weird to think that there are shapes that have trends, but they do. There's colors that trend, but you might also have colors that you want to use because they're your school colors. And then I guess the last thing I had on my list, I mean, certainly deleting stuff is as easy as highlighting it and hitting the delete button. But if I want to get rid of this slide here, I can right click and I can duplicate that slide. So if I'm doing a lot of things that are similar, again, I can duplicate and get right in there. I can also delete. I love the fact that it always gives you that second chance in case you click the wrong one. And you can, you know, have adding slides and doing all kinds of fun things. I'm going to show you really quick another little, let's see, I don't want to save that. I'm going to see if so this is this little bingo project that I did with my sustainability coordinator. And this is why I think it's totally worth taking the time to learn Articulate Storyline, because there are so many ways that you can use it once you have the basics down. So I'm going to click over here, and what you can see is a pretty standard looking bingo board. When we both lost April, for me, it was my Sexual Assault Awareness Month activities. And for her, it was 2 weeks worth of Earth Day focused activities. We worked together to create this online content for students. And so each of these boxes became a button that connected out to a slide. And so at the bottom here, so we have this kind of unique, zoom way out. So here's all of those 25 different slides that connect off of that one main bingo board. If I double click this one, we can come here. So, you know, pretty simple. We put the content there. You can link out to other websites, and that's pretty easy to do. And then what we did is if you did that activity, you could click this box and it was set up so that when you got back to the board, it would show up with an X on that box. And so there's some little fun builds that you can do to make some engaging interactive content. We talked a little bit last week about when we publish, you can publish into something called a SCORM 1.2 file, which makes it readable by your LMS program, but you can also publish to HTML, which translates it into web-friendly language. And so I use this a lot now on campus to make little programs that run like an app and that you can make sure it looks good on a cell phone. But it's given me some opportunities to push content out, interactive content out in a way that I normally wouldn't have access to. And people are always kind of like, when did you learn to code websites? And like, I didn't have to learn how to code websites. I was able to take what I learned in this program and just kind of tweak it a little bit. And so that's what I have for you this week. If you haven't already downloaded the technical document, I totally recommend doing that. There's a lot of content in there that I think you can make use of. But thinking through, you know, how do we get you up and rolling with your own custom SPARC for your campus? I'm here to answer your questions, so go ahead and ask. Or if I think there's also points too where it's just extremely muddy, and this is a long process to get from kind of starting from scratch to that program that you actually have students taking on campus. And I would say, like, of all of the things I've done professionally, this is the project that's caused me the most sleepless nights. And as I have become more connected with other people who take on this process of doing these kinds of builds, like, I almost think of myself as having like a midwife position now of like help coaching people through the birthing process of these programs. It is definitely, they are heavy lift programs, but you know, I can speak from, I survived it. I'm on the other end. I definitely have lessons learned that I'm happy to share. So if you've got any questions about what we talked about today, last week, or just, you know, things that are like current out, I invite you to share. I unmuted everybody. Nope, remuted. So
I tried again, sorry.
that's okay.
Use the chat feature.
Yep. I think what I will also offer here too is I'm going to plug my email into the chat box too, in case you have a question that you think of later. You know, again, you know, I get it. I get that this is a heavy lift. This is an intense project, and I think sometimes like the things that I worried about weren't necessarily the big worries, but I also totally honor the fact that sometimes you get like that panic moment, or you have somebody asks you a question and you don't have the answer. So, you know, if I can be of assistance in helping answer questions along the way, along this process, I want to be there.
Okay, I'm not seeing any questions coming across.
No.
Let's see. Oh, we got a thank you.
Yeah.
And this, Rebecca, is directed to you, whether or not a fall implementation would be realistic.
You know, I used to think not, but I think, I mean, I think one person taking it on, I think it is going to be a lot of work. I think it is going to be a couple of weeks of full-time work, but if you've got a supportive team, I think it's definitely doable. I still think like the order that I present the technical manual in will still be a good guide, and you're probably just going to want to be cranking through, you know, a chapter every couple of days to kind of keep yourself on track. You know, you skip what you have to skip and you go on to the next thing. But you know, again, I think if you've got a couple of people who can help you organize, and I would say, you know, definitely go back and, like, I think last week's homework, I suggested you go back and experience the SPARC as I created it, and just jot down some notes of like what you like and what you don't like and what you want to use for yourself and what you don't want to use for yourself, and start right there. And just the slides that are easy to modify, just start jumping in and doing those. You know, I think it's a doable thing. I think it's ambitious, but I think it's doable. You know, and you know, write down my email address. If you get stuck somewhere, we can hop on a phone call together. I mean, and I have done some phone conversations with some schools too, where you know they want to pull together their team, and they'll you know bring me in, and we'll just do a. I mean, I feel like everybody's so much more capable of doing like the video chat stuff now. Like, it is a skill we all have firmly under our belts. So, you know, if you want to pull together a team of folks and have me hop on a phone call with a team, we can do that too.
Great. Is there anyone else that has any questions? If not, I just wanted to say again, as I did at the beginning, we've got a different way of registering for next week's. training, and it's a clickable link that's in the comments. So hopefully you'll be able to see that and to use that to register. If not, Rebecca, I think you suggested we have somebody man the other one. So I'll have to work on getting somebody to do that because we don't, you know, we want everyone to have access that wants it. So, but if anybody, any final comments, questions, or anything? Okay, well, hearing none, I guess that will conclude today's training. Rebecca, thank you for everything as always.
You're welcome. Have a great week and welcome to the SPARC family, folks.